going to start off with Jasmine Lever, the director and producer of the documentary The Invisible Vegan. Jasmine is an actress, an animal advocate, an influencer, and as you can tell, she's an all-round amazing person. She's also, we're very lucky to have her as a Sentient media advisor. She's super supportive and a deeply patient person, and what's really cool is this carries through to her online personality. She's always speaking at events and sharing her story. And Jasmine, I'm so glad to have you with us. Could you shed a little bit more light on how you got started and where you are now?
So I used to work in film and TV. How's the audio? Good. Okay. So I used to work in film and TV, and I wanted an opportunity to write on a documentary series, and the executive producer of the show kind of laughed at me, which is what I needed. And I decided like, oh, okay, well, he doesn't think I can do it. Great. I need to quit this job and do it for myself. So I produced a film, The Invisible Vegan, with my partner, Kenneth Leva. And from there, you know, we kind of built an Instagram and Facebook following around the film. So I guess that speaks to why I'm on this panel today.
Thank you, Jasmine. And then I want to go on to Neil Patel. It's tough to know where to begin with Neil. He started his first website at 16, and I understand he quickly learned that paying marketers was a bit of a waste of money, so he decided to teach himself how to do his own promotion. And I guess fast forward to now, Neil is a New York Times best-selling author. He was named one of the top 100 entrepreneurs under the age of 30 by the then President Barack Obama. There's a whole great list of accolades and things I could say about Neil, but the thing that I really love about him is how passionate he is about helping small businesses and emerging entrepreneurs reach their potential through digital marketing. Neil, it's an honor to have you with us. Could you offer a little glimpse into how you got started and where you are now?
Sure. So when I first started my first website, I paid a marketing firm to help me grow my traffic. They provided little to no results. They took my money, and from being broke and frustrated, I had no choice but to learn marketing on my own. And over time, I got decent at it, started doing it for other people, and that's led me to where I am today.
Thank you. Great to have you with us. And then on to John Oberg, a very well-known animal advocate, influencer, social media professional. John purposely uses social media to fight for the animals, and his advocacy actually began with him going out and leafleting on campuses and doing in-person outreach, and then he transitioned to digital. John is another wonderful person to have on our panel, very open, very supportive, and we're thrilled to have him with us today. John, could you tell us a little bit more about how you got started and where you are now?
Yeah, totally, Anna. It's great to be here with such distinguished panelists and yourself, Anna. And thank you to all the viewers who are taking some time out of your day to hear what we have to say. Much appreciated. So I got my start in activism about 10 years ago, and it was on the ground activism. So I did a variety of tactics to try and create a better world for animals. I did everything from handing out free vegan food to handing out pamphlets on college campuses, to showing video, doing demos, protests, everything you can think of. And I really liked leafletting, and I got a job handing out pamphlets all over North America. I love that. And then that kind of transitioned into social media activism about 7 years ago. And I kind of reluctantly did that because at the time I was unable to travel. And so I was like, I guess I'll just do social media activism from my computer from home. And I very quickly realized that in just a day of doing social media activism, I could have as much of an impact as I would in a year or 10 years of handing out leaflets on college campuses or on street corners. And so I started focusing on social media advocacy exclusively. And I've been doing that for a number of years now, first with 2 different animal rights organizations. And now I'm doing it independently for almost the last 2 years. And I really love it, and I find it to be an extremely impactful way for animal advocates, but anybody with a message and a cause to really extend their reach and their message.
Thank you. And John, while we still got you off mute, I'm going to ask each of you, just to sate my own curiosity, what is your favorite social platform and why? And John, you can kick us off.
Sure. The one so I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I would say the one I kind of enjoy the most is Instagram. but the one I find to be most valuable is Twitter. And that's because I spent a lot of resources really building up my Twitter over the last few years. And so that's where I get the biggest bang for my buck.
Nice. Neil?
My favorite is Instagram because out of all the social networks that I use, it's the most personable. Like I feel like I'm actually really connecting with individuals on there and seeing their message. And like Facebook, tons of ads. LinkedIn, very corporate. Twitter, very news oriented. But Instagram, the purpose of the social network is to be social and get to know each other. And I really feel that Instagram does a better job of that than any other network out there.
Nice. And Jasmine?
I am going to have to go with Instagram as well. And I think part of that is because I'm into documentaries. When you look at everyone's stories, right, it almost feels like, I'm looking at documentaries of all my friends' lives. So I think it's kind of cool.
So Instagram wins, basically. Sorry, John. Okay, so today we're just going to go straight back to the basics. Oh, sorry, Jasmine. What did you say? I think we got that it was Instagram, right? But yeah, okay, so today we're going to go right back to the basics. We're talking now to writers and journalists and individuals who wish to get published and build their own identity. Neil, I'd like to ask you, what are the basics of building a personal brand? Like, how should people get started building a following?
The easiest ways to leverage first off is to leverage the type of content that you're naturally best at. See, some people are better at video, some people are better at audio, which could be podcasting, some people could be better at just writing. And whatever it may be, go out there and publish it, whether it's all over the social web, on your own blog, or Tumblr, or WordPress, or Medium. And you can repurpose that same piece of content and push it out everywhere because it's just branding, more people will see it. And if you do that consistently, on multiple times a week. And if you do that for a few years, you'll start building up a brand. I know that sounds like a long time, but brands don't get built overnight. And in general, they call it the rule of 7. When someone sees or interacts with the brand, whether it's personal or corporate, 7 times, they're much more likely to remember it, follow it, and evangelize it. So that's why you got to continually push out information and content. And you have to do it on a regular basis for many years.
Nice. I just want to say as well, we are going to be doing a Q&A. So throughout, if you have any questions, just please type them in. And at the end, we'll get to ask them to our panelists. Jasmine or John, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say, well, this is based on my personal experience. To build your audience, build yourself. For me, people enjoyed, it was like watching a movie. People enjoyed watching my journey. People enjoyed, me being honest about, okay, I have this documentary. I don't know how I'm going to fund it and I need help. And me just putting my genuine journey online and documenting it. So I would say, yeah, if you have a product, if you have, if you're an artist, show yourself, show your art, show how you're building, because people like to see those journeys.
Nice, that's great advice. And John, I was going to follow up with you actually on, unless you've got something you want to add to this. I was going to ask you, because you've done work for brands, obviously building up social profiles. So traditionally, when we're approaching a brand, we look at who their target audience is, and then we build a strategy around it. How do you do that when it comes to yourself, like as an individual, or
Yeah, so I focus on, the biggest goal for me as a social media animal advocate is reach, getting as many people to see my content as possible, because it's a numbers game, right? So you want to help animals. How do you do that? You get people to learn how animals are treated. How do you get that? You get you get as many views as possible. So that's my goal always. And so what drives that goal is having more of a following. And so who is going to follow an animal advocate? You want to find the lowest hanging fruit and focus on them. So you want to find the people who are most likely to follow you as a result. So if you're a journalist and your focus is animal advocacy, maybe you shouldn't focus on, people who are heavily invested in, their main interest in life is sports. they might not have that much of an interest. So you want to focus on the people who are interested in the kind of content that you're creating and you're pushing out there. And just to add to what Neil and Jasmine said, you really want to find your niche and what makes you stand out. And a lot of us are really good at some things and bad at some things. I'm bad at a lot of things, but there's a few things that I'm good at, and I exploit those few things that I'm good at. So talking about animal advocacy is something that I'm decent at. So that's where I focus all of my efforts, and therefore people who are interested in that are more likely to follow me. So you really need to figure out what your niche is and run with it.
That's great advice. Thanks. And a lot of that can be trial and error as well, right? Like something you think you might be good at, you might not be so good at. So you should just get out there and, like Neil says and Jasmine says, be yourself, start producing content, push things out.
Yeah, so much about social media is just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks.
Absolutely. And like we mentioned, or I mentioned at the beginning, we touched on the dangers of existing in a silo, existing in an echo chamber, preaching to your existing audience. This matters particularly when we're talking about social justice, because people don't realize how difficult it is to actually get outside of your echo chamber when you're not using, particularly when you're not using paid media. I was wondering if anybody had any advice on that. And Jasmine, I don't know if you would be able to share some tips on reaching new audiences. How do you reach a new audience? Oh, hang on. I'm going to unmute. Oh, Jasmine, you're on mute. There we go.
All right, we got it. Okay,
yeah,
so one thing that I did was to reach new audiences. I reached out to people in the communities that I wanted to reach, and I asked them to share my content. So if I'm reaching out to, plant-based news, Sentient Media, just all these channels, they're going to send my stuff out to their networks, and then some of their networks become my networks. And sometimes it can be a mutually beneficial arrangement. Like I'll also feature I used to do like IV features where I would feature prominent people in the vegan movement. So then they'll see like, oh, look, she's supporting me, I'll support her. So I think building a community and relationships with people really helps.
Yeah, that's great advice. Neil, is there anything that you would add to that?
No, I think she was spot on. And the big thing to keep in mind is if any of you guys are going to be leveraging social and trying to get your word out, just be patient. You're not going to get the results you want on day one. It takes a very long time. You have to be persistent. And if you're going to do it, be you. I know Jasmine talked a little bit about that. A lot of people try to be someone they're not. And if people want to follow you for who you are, it's great. They should accept you for that. And if they don't like it, then too bad for them, and they can move on and go find someone else, and you're not going to please everyone, and that's okay.
And John?
Yeah, if you're to kind of go on that point, if you're trying to reach people outside of your silo, a really important fact to remember is the more shares your content gets, this is particularly on Facebook and Twitter and other share-based platforms, the more shares your content gets, the further and further away it is away from your silo. So the more and more of the portion will be significantly higher of people who aren't in your little silo. And so for vegan activism, for example, initially maybe the first few people who see your post might be people who already agree with you. But as the shares start to build up, more and more become non-vegan. So let's say all of my followers were vegan. Maybe initially 100% or 90% of the people who are seeing my content are vegan. As those shares start to pile up, that percentage will change and change and change. And eventually 90% of the people who are seeing it are non-vegan, who are the people who we need to be reaching. So the more shares, the better.
Great. Yeah, I want to kind of talk a bit more on the danger side of things for people who are just getting started. there is obviously a big critique of social because of the addictive nature of it. You know, it's obviously a lot of it is based on models, one of them behavior of gambling, to keep people scrolling and keep people online, keep people addicted. I was curious, Neil, if you had any thoughts about how we should approach the addictive nature of social media, either as like purveyors or users of social media.
Each person is, has their own poison. Some people are addicted to it. Some people aren't. And some people have these hacks, like, let me try this app, or let me limit it to these time of day. Each person has to figure out what's right for them. But the one thing I always tell people is live life for the moment. And what I mean by that is, I was in Central Park before all the COVID stuff, and I saw people taking pictures for social media, and that's fine. But they were on their device all day long. And, you could tell some of these people is their first time in Central Park. It's like, enjoy it for what it is. Like, it's okay if you don't see what's happening right then and right then. You can always go back to it later on. It's not going to go away. And I just tell people, live life for the moment it is, and don't worry about every little thing, especially things that you can't control, and it's just like, what do? It's just enjoy it for what you can and cherish every moment. And if you happen to snap it, I'm not saying don't take your picture, don't post your story, but just truly enjoy what you have in life, whether it's your family, your friends, sickness. A lot of shit goes wrong that you can't control, right? So just be careful and control. Like the other day, someone got shot when he was trying to help other people avoid a fight. And it's just like, it's crazy. You got to really cherish life and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, well said. There's more to life than taking selfies. Jasmine and John, would either of you have anything to add to that?
Well, I guess to piggyback off that point, I completely agree. And I think when you're on social media, it is an addiction, and there is this, it's almost this need to post. I got to post more content, to the point that you think you can't even take a break. But when you work like that, sometimes it can get a little bit exhausting. So if you're trying to self to begin with, it's okay to take a break. Sometimes it's better if you do. Like, hey, maybe you need a week off of social media. Maybe you just need a point to like breathe and regroup and plan out what you want to do so you can do it with more intention instead of feeling that stressful pressure. When you feel that, just take a break, and it's okay.
John, do you ever take a break?
Yeah, I have two recommendations for those out there who are concerned about their usage of social media. And that is, one, manage expectations, and two, schedule posts. So for number two, schedule posts in advance, because it'll make your life so much simpler. It is so stressful to wake up every day and think, what am I going to post today? What am I going to post today? So doing it in advance really makes your life a lot easier, and also allows you to control your strategy better. And then the first one, manage expectations. Understand that, hey, yes, if I spent 8 hours on Twitter or Instagram today, I could get another 100 or 1,000 followers. But if I didn't, I'd live a happier life. And if you're okay with, if like what you find to be valuable is absolutely maximizing the good you can do on social media, then yeah, sit on it all day. But if you can manage those expectations and kind of understand, okay, maybe I won't get quite as much of an impact out of social media today, but I'm going to live the day I want to live.
Great advice. I kind of want to go and chill now. So go on, Justin.
Can I ask him a question, John? So do you do what you said, plan your social media, just for people who might not know? Like, I like Planoly and Hootsuite. Those are the two I used. Which planning software or apps would you recommend to people?
Great question, Jasmine. The platform that I use is Buffer. So Buffer is, it's pretty cheap. I mean, I think it's very reasonable, the cost, and the user interface is very simple. So it's especially great for new users of social media, or people who don't do this full time. So I really, really love Buffer. People can sign up at buffer.com. There's a free version where you can schedule up to 10 posts, and then I think the 100 posts is like $15 a month or something, but I think it's well worth it.
Neil, have you got any recommendations on software?
No, they pretty much named them all. They're all very similar: Buffer, Hootsuite, pick your poison and use it.
I wanted to talk about images. So a lot of the time when we're doing, particularly like for social justice causes, there can be a lot of distressing images that get used on social. And we've done our own experiments at Sentient Media, and actually people tend to respond more to the distressing images, which puts you in a position of, well, you need to decide how much you're using these images, like, you know, whether people are going to get fatigue and, you know, not really, it's not going to have an impact anymore. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from all of you on that. Does anybody want to go first?
I'd be happy to go first because this is what I do. This is like much of what I do is posting distressing images. So I try to strike this right balance between distressing my viewers and also inspiring them. So I will often have a pattern. So it's not like set in stone, but I try to go happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad, and then maybe like every fifth or sixth post, just throwing something like a curveball in there. And that way I'm not burning people out. Because if I'm posting this, even if it's really good content, if it's the same kind of content every day, you're going to burn people out and you're going to bore them. So even if it's really good content, those two things are going to happen. So for that reason, I really try to have a balance there. And then also one other thing about the distressing content is I try to make it distressing content, but not so distressing that they're just going to turn away. So there's a lot of farm animal abuse content I could push out there that is just absolutely awful, like just the worst of the worst that you can think of. But I choose not to post that. I choose to post things that maybe pull on the heartstrings a bit more, things that make you really empathize with that animal, things that make people maybe a bit sad, but maybe not just so horrified that they immediately scroll past or choose to unfollow you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you're really playing with people's emotions by choosing what images you're putting in. It's like you're kind of like the guardian of, yeah, how far can we go that's not going to push people completely away. Jasmine, have you got anything you would add to that?
So for me, a part of my film was kind of breaking down why veganism, non-vegans. And some of the complaints I get is people think vegans are crazy. People think vegans are fanatics. And I mean, you have like fanatics in every group or whatever. But one thing I try to promote is like, no, not everyone is pushy. Not everyone, shows graphic images all day, every day. So I'm trying to get the people who kind of don't respond well to having that kind of stuff just thrust at them. And I just think of my content the same way I think of conversations with people while they're at work. Some people consume this content while they're at work, while they're with their kids. You don't want an image of like a cow's neck being slashed, while you're at dinner checking your Instagram, or while you're like at work, because you're not in the right mind space. So that's how I present my information. Like if I am going to post something like that, it'll be in a video and you'll kind of know it'll be a build up or a warning to it. And I don't do that often. So I'm kind of like John, where I pull on heartstrings more so.
Great. That's great advice and a great approach. Neil, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I mainly post the positive content, and I just rotate it up. I'll have a few different types, and I experiment, and every once in a while throw out new types of content. And if it does well, I do more of it. While the old stuff stops working, I do less of it, and I just do whatever is causing the reach, causing the conversions, and just performing the best.
Great. Okay, so let's say that our people have set up their feeds, they're sharing their content regularly, they're really proud of everything they're putting out, and then boom, they get hit with the trolls. Obviously, this happens to all of us. I wanted to actually start with Jasmine here because Jasmine, I know your style is to take your time and be considered in your response, like, part of the whole reason you made the documentary. I'm curious about your approach or your advice for dealing with trolls when you can't necessarily take all of that time to consider a reply.
So one of my biggest things I always say, and this is in real life conversations too, I'm not invested in other people's ignorance. You know, if someone shows that they want to be ignorant, I'm not going to exhaust myself to reform them. It's just like, okay, I hope they get over that. So when I have people that, I guess, troll me, if they say disrespectful things on my platform, you know, I just block them. Or if they express, you know, they disagree with what I'm saying very strongly, I'll just thank them for their opinion. Like, well, you know, we see the world differently, but I understand your opinion and your passion. Thank you for sharing it. I don't do the long debates back and forth, or, you know, making a big to do about someone being negative towards me. I just don't give that kind of stuff that much attention.
Mm. And John, you tend to kind of you reply to people in part, and then you end it, right? Like, what could you explain a bit more about your approach?
Well, in general, I mean, I kind of love trolls because they help you. They help the algorithm, okay? They help you, you know, algorithm is very cutthroat, okay? So you really want to get into people's news feeds. And by getting people to troll you, it's actually, it benefits you. You know, little do they know that they're actually helping you. But as far as engaging with them, you know, if somebody crosses a line, I don't have a problem with blocking them. But most of the time, I will take that as an opportunity to reply to them and then give them my 2 cents in a polite way that doesn't make them shut down and doesn't make them just lash out back at me. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had, whether, you know, back when I was handing out leaflets or on social media, where somebody comes, you know, is offended by the idea of veganism, and they come at me really strongly, and then I come at them with respect, and their walls just come down immediately. They're just like, okay, you know what, that I crossed the line. And a lot of good actually comes from that. So I think that I really love Jasmine's approach of speaking with them kindly, and also just doing it really briefly, because it's an opportunity cost, right? If I would love to spend all day talking to people, or like debating with, or, you know, talking with trolls, but that would not be a great use of my time, right? So I do it occasionally. So maybe a few times a day I'll reply to some trolls, but most of the time, not so much.
And Neil, what's your approach?
I just ignore them. You know, when people say negative stuff, I really just do ignore them. I always say ignorance is bliss too. It's funny, some people will message me being like, "Oh, you see this person said so and so." I'm like, "No, I didn't see it. Sucks that I saw it now." But I'm like, ignorance is bliss. I'm like, don't show me when people say bad stuff. And I'm like, it is what it is. I try to do my best. I try to be ethical. I try to not hurt people. And haters gonna hate. So just ignore them and don't try to pay attention.
Yeah, great advice. This is like three kind of different approaches here. I like that. That's great. And I wanted to dig into our most successful strategies that we've used throughout our careers. And Neil, I'd love to start with you. Like, what would you say? You know, obviously you've been doing this for such a long time. What if you could pick one strategy that's got you the most success or the most awareness? Like, what would that be?
Consistency, not really a strategy, but I've been doing this since I was 16 years old. So I'm getting older now. I'm 35, but time really does heal a lot of stuff and gets results. Most people give up after a week or two or a month or even a year. If you do something long enough, you'll do okay.
So how consistent have you been, like, from the age of 16? Like, have you been producing stuff like weekly, day? Like, what would you say?
Sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. It's changed. I should have been more consistent. But in all honesty, like I said, it's just, if you do it long enough, you'll learn what works, you learn what doesn't work. I'm not the smartest person. I don't have a degree from Harvard or anything like that. It's just at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with Harvard, great school. I'm not one who would be able to get in. It's more so, I look at it as you just learn from over time. Over the years, I've learned what not to do. Not because I'm smart, it's just I made so many mistakes. Eventually, you learn what mistake not to repeat, and then you're left with the stuff that you should do, and time buys that. Especially with things like getting your message out, marketing, social media, whatever it may be. It's time really does solve a lot of problems. So you got to be consistent and persistent. Just keep pushing.
And just keeping you on the spotlight right now, Neil, like, how has your persona or your like your personal brand evolved, because you've grown up with it, you know, from the age of 16 to 35, like you've obviously changed as a person in that time. Like, how do you kind of track that?
I'm more private now than I was ever before. Before I was more flexible, but I'm like, yeah, I want the limelight, I want this. Now I'm just like, yeah, I don't really care if anyone knows me. I'm not saying I'm popular anyways, but you know, I like my family life. I like the peace and quiet. I never had issues that other people have anyways, because I don't have that many followers. But I look at it as I just, more so out of everything, I stick with business on my profiles. And that's really it. Every once in a while, I'll post a personal picture. I know the audience loves it, because when I post personal stuff, it does like 2 to 3 times better. I just don't care for everyone to see my personal life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And John, moving on to you, like, what do you think for you has been your most successful strategy to date?
Yeah, so the most successful strategy that I've found with social media, it isn't so much sexy. It's just like a few best practices that we all need to do if we want to up our social media game and really maximize the good that we can do. And 100% what Neil said, consistency. Consistency is so important. It's not just important to have a good social media post and then, you know, not post again for weeks or months. You got to do that every day or very consistently at least. Also, utilizing your connections and create new connections. So really using those to your advantage, managing your expectations. So really making sure that you understand that you're not going to blow up overnight, like Neil was saying earlier. So really have a reasonable goal in mind. Also, always put yourself in your audience's shoes. It's when you look at a post, don't say, oh yeah, I think this is a cool post, I would like that post. Ask yourself, okay, would my audience like this post? Would my audience take the time out of their day to click the like button or to click the share button? And you really kind of have to have that mindset. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention is just the importance of shares. Shares drive growth of your following, and then also shares drive the vast majority of the views. So even if a person only has 1,000 followers, their content is being seen tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of times in a year. Most of those views are from people who don't follow you. They haven't already opted in to following you. And so having this mindset of, okay, is what I'm posting today, is how I'm phrasing the caption, is how I'm cropping the image, is it going to lead to as many shares as possible? Because shares are so vital in today's social media world.
Great advice. And Jasmine, on to you.
I would say just remember what you want to use social media for. So for me, you know, I work in film, so to have a social media presence is definitely a benefit, but I had to remember at first I'm a filmmaker. Because when I built my audience, that's how I built it. It's like, oh, look, now I can post cool behind the scenes photos. What I've seen other people do is they want to start these businesses, like say it's event planning. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm starting this event planning, but they're not planning anything. Like they're putting all this focus around the topic that they're no longer, you know, actually doing things in their field. So I would say determine what your priority is. And if your priority is to, you know, be an event planner, you need to get out there and start planning events, and then just make sure you have a cool photographer there, or you can take your own cool photos either way while you're actually doing your number one career, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like, do what you want to do and understand that that's what you make your content about, right? So if you want to be a writer, then you're writing and you're sharing your content. If you're a filmmaker, you're sharing that content. Yeah. Okay, so we've got consistency, shares, and doing what you want to do and using that. That's great tips. Okay, now I want to know something that totally bombed from each of you. So Jasmine, I've still got you here. Is there anything that you're unmuted, so I'll pick on you. Is there anything that you thought was going to work that then just totally didn't, and you learned from it?
I guess what I learned, the lesson that I learned was kind of like women with our weight. We don't pay attention to the numbers because, you know, when you look at the numbers, that's when you start feeling like, oh my God, no. Don't pay attention to the likes. Like, don't pay it. I mean, okay, the reason why is because I would post, say I post a picture of me at the beach and I'm in my bikini top, that's going to get a lot of numbers. And then I post a picture about something I care about on a moral level, and that would only get about 1/4 of the likes. And then I would feel discouraged to post more meaningful content. But at the end of the day, you know, I'd rather be the class president than the prom queen. No shade to the prom queen. And I, you know, don't ever want to compromise my message just to be more popular. So I would say don't get too caught up in numbers.
Great. Yeah, that's great advice. John, what about you? Anything you thought was going to work that totally bombed?
Yeah, well, totally agree with what Jasmine said about meaningful content often getting the least amount of engagement. So for me, I won't throw an exact example out there, but in general, often the things that are least meaningful will get the most engagement, and the things that are most meaningful to me as an individual might perform the least well. But that's okay. For me, I just factor that into my strategy. So I'll say, okay, you know, Monday and Tuesday, I'm going to post these like posts I know will get a lot of engagement. Wednesday is a really meaningful post. Then Thursday, Friday, back to the other stuff. And then I'll try and get as much engagement as possible on these other posts that'll help drive some engagement for that middle post. So it's just really understanding and accepting that, hey, some things that, you know, we are really important might not get the engagement they deserve, but that's just how social media works, and we need to operate within how this beast operates.
That's great advice. So yeah, hiding the kind of the bit that you want to succeed in amongst the things that you know will succeed. So yeah, that's great. Neil, anything that you if you want to shed some light on yours?
Yeah, you know, I look at social media as a crapshoot. A lot of times the things that you think will do well don't do well, and the things that you think shouldn't do well do really well. And that's what I look at as experimentation. And you also have to decide if you want to keep supporting the stuff that does well if you don't like it. Like as Jasmine may mention, she may post some types of image that does way better and the others are discouraging, but that doesn't stop her. She still posts the images that she wants because that's important to her. And you just have to keep that in mind, in which not always will things work out the way you want. And sometimes you just got to do what you want, even if the numbers don't show the growth that you please or the engagement that you want. And, you know, it is what it is. It's sad, but it's the reality.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, we're kind of coming to the point now where I think we should move into the Q&A. So we have a question here. What would be, this is open to all of you, so whoever wants to answer this. What would be the best way to promote yourself with a written paper? It lends itself less well to social media platforms.
Is this a published paper or just a written paper you have on your computer?
They haven't specified, but I think it must be like a public, if we're talking about our fellowship, for example, a lot of people write extended like academic papers or long form academic papers that, yeah, I guess they're wondering how to actually leverage that on social.
That's tough. I mean, I actually posted about a published paper like maybe a month ago that was talking about the tie between, you know, farm animal agriculture and the potential effect on pandemics, and it didn't perform that well. I knew it wouldn't perform that well, but you know, I got it the engagement that I could. What I did, I believe in that instance, and what I recommend doing is just finding one or two either quotes from it or just summing it up in a very, very brief way. That's maybe throw a little bit of like shock and awe in there if possible. You know, you really talk it up. Also, you can talk about how, you know, what that paper means to you. And people generally care what you have to say or what you think about, and what you think about things. You know, why do you choose to follow someone on social media? Because you care about them. And so giving your opinion about something really means more than what that paper will even mean.
Yeah, and I also think with like published papers, in a way, you're really kind of lucky because you've got presumably a long form piece of writing that's going to include like lots of different facts, lots of different points. You could do Twitter threads where you start to tell the story of what's in that writing, and you have a whole like creating tweets or creating captions and posts based off a long form piece of content is almost a dream, because you can pick all of these different moments and it will last for a long time, right? Neil, is there anything you would add there to like getting out long form content?
Just publish it. Make sure you're using keywords that people search for, because if you don't, then no one's going to end up finding it other than on social. And if you have that paper and you want press about it, if you're open to this, publish the paper online on your social. You can write articles on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, not really, but the social networks that allow text, straight up just publish the whole thing.
Yeah, great point. Jasmine, anything you would add to this one?
I'm just taking a stab in the dark. I would say, well, if I were doing that, I would try to attach it to some other form of media. So even if you could find, say cool images that go with the paper that you can, use in John's idea, that you could put your quotes on and kind of tell people where they can find it. Or if you could tell a almost visual story, like using some cool video and reading maybe a paragraph from the essay and putting it over all these like cool images, that might be a way to get people to want to read the entire paper, like a teaser.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, and it's so easy to make these little videos now. You can even do it on platforms like Canva or Lumen 5, like just edits together the stuff for you, put your text on. Yeah, great advice. I have a question here I'm going to direct this one to Neil. Do you think it's more important to create a personal brand on social, or your own website where you might have more control over your audience and reach?
Either one, whether it's a corporate brand, website brand, personal brand, there's no right or wrong answer. Some people do both. Some people just focus. Like the biggest companies the biggest brands in the world are corporate brands from a financial aspect. People typically resonate more with personal brands, but they're harder to sell and they don't make as much money. So you just got to figure out what you do. It is easier to grow a personal brand over a corporate brand. But again, pick whatever resonates with you and you think is a good fit for you and your audience and your overall mission.
Great. And I have a question here open to everybody. Somebody wants to collaborate with other groups for the greater good, but they're requiring a lot of personal details, addresses, etc., which they don't really want to share. Does anybody have any advice about privacy and what kind of things people should share? They're more like data protection kind of question.
I'm not sure why they're asking for all that stuff. They shouldn't ask for it if it's personal information. I don't get why they need it in the first place.
Yeah, so just
I agree.
Don't give it away. Cool. I would agree with that.
Are we talking about, like, say a company wants you to try their vegan cheese online and they're asking for your address? Is it that kind of those kind of
they
details?
said that it was like collaborating with companies for the greater good. So yeah. I'm not exactly sure. Okay, we have another question here. We have a question here for John. This is, which theme-based posts performs best for you and which ones don't?
What was the second word?
Which theme-based post?
Theme. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I think that the things that perform best for me would be farm animal cruelty and farm animal, like happy farm animals. And if I want to get a little bit more detail with happy farm animals, I would say like rescued farm animals. So I would say those two things probably perform best. That being said, I still sprinkle in other content for two reasons. One, I don't want to bore my audience, or burn them out. But also similar to how Neil was talking about, he'll throw a curveball once in a while. I also try to throw in things that are a little bit outside my comfort zone or outside of what I would normally post. Yeah, and then I also really try to implement my own personal brand into things. So I try to post about, so like for Twitter, I tweet usually once or twice a day. I try at least once per week to post about myself, whether it's an article I've written, an article I've appeared in, a video of me talking about advocacy or something, at least once a week. That way people can kind of put a face to my brand, as opposed to just seeing my name and just seeing my profile photo, taking it a little bit further.
That's great advice. Thanks. And Neil, one for you now. This is about SEO, and I'm aware we haven't even touched on SEO yet. So I wonder if you could answer this in two parts. If you could firstly just very top level explain what SEO is, and then secondly, the question is, SEO, what two things should we definitely avoid doing on our website?
So the first is SEO is, just ranking high on Google, so that, at the top is a paid listings, underneath is a free listings. SEO is getting higher in the free listings. And two things to avoid if you want to be at the top is, first, make sure your website loads fast. If it loads forever, you're not going to rank well. And third is, don't write content in silos. What I mean by that is, if you have multiple articles on, if you have an article on animal cruelty and you have one on cruelty on farms, make sure you link them together versus keeping everything separate.
Great advice. And we have a question for Jasmine. Video content promotion. How would you recommend people promote their video content?
Can you repeat the end of the question again? How would you recommend people promote
video content?
Oh, so for me, I had a film. So what I did was I went through, I found some of the best snippets, usually between 30 and 45 seconds. And I would just post. I would also videos, like videos that weren't used in the cut, so people can also get a feel for the process behind the camera, which people really like as well. So that's another thing you can do too. Like you can use your BTS stuff to promote, behind the scenes stuff to promote your actual video.
Great advice. Okay, so somebody here is saying that they're, even if their content's good and it's getting ignored, they only have, say, 20 followers on Twitter, is it worth paying for promotions? Neil, I'm going to direct that at you.
You can. There's nothing wrong with paying for promotion to get your message out. Just keep in mind, once you're done paying for promotion, that's it. You're probably not going to get a ton of followers, but you will get more views. And if it's important content or important message that you want out, by all means, pay for it. And some of these networks, it's really cheap to do that. The one thing I would avoid is paying for followers, because that does not do well. I know they didn't ask that, but I would just not pay for followers.
Is there any other way that they could, any other tip that you would give for them to actually get followers without having to pay?
Publish good content that people love. The easiest way to get more followers is you find other people with accounts. Like, how you're doing this interview in essence. If we were all live on Instagram or YouTube, whatever channel that you're trying to promote, and both people went live at the same time and one interviewed the other, we'll find is audiences will cross-pollinate, in which other people's followers will start following you. That's one of the quickest and easiest ways to get followers.
Great advice. And I think we're going to do one more question. Okay, what do we think the future of social media looks like? Open that up to any of you.
I would say video and stories. So I personally don't love stories. So, stories are like Instagram stories, Snapchat, that sort of ephemeral content that goes away after 24 hours. I personally don't love it, but it's here to stay, and I think it's the future of social media. So I would definitely familiarize yourself with stories and thinking about how you can get your content out there via stories. So if you are a journalist or you have a piece published, thinking about how you can communicate that piece with your audience. And now all these platforms are starting to introduce their own story features. YouTube recently did. Twitter is experimenting with it. Facebook already has it. Of course, Instagram has it. It's had it since 2016. Started with Snapchat. So all the platforms have this story feature. And so I would definitely get on stories as soon as possible. And also, last thing is just as far as the future goes, pay attention to emerging platforms. So right now, TikTok is emerging, and it's very important that you don't just invest all of your resources into one single platform, because if you do, and that platform falls out of favor with the general public, you've really put yourself in a tough position. So spread your time around a little bit, and don't forget about those emerging platforms like TikTok, for example.
Okay, I think we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to get final thoughts from each of you. Jasmine, if there was one thing that everybody should take away from today's session, if there's one thing that you want them to remember, what would it be?
Well, one thing I would say is, the board, whatever you're doing, always remember why you're doing it. At a deep heart level, if you are trying to be a social media activist, if that is where your heart is and that's what makes you happy, cool, do it because you love it at every point. Because when you start doing things that you don't love and you do it without passion, it's hard to do it well, and then you don't walk away fulfilled or happy. So if this is the journey that you want to go on, make sure you enjoy the journey, enjoy the process, and find a way to love it, and don't be as concerned with followers. Do it because you love it.
That's great advice. I kind of lost you a little bit at the end, but I think you said don't be so concerned with followers, do it because you love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful advice. Neil, what would your takeaway be?
Be consistent. You're not going to get results unless you're consistent, and you need to do that for a very long time.
Excellent. John?
I would say have patience, and which kind of goes along with having consistency. Those two things go hand in hand. Understand you're fighting against an algorithm every day of your life on social media. And lastly, really pay attention to what's working both for you and for your competitors, and pay attention to what's not working for both you and your competitors, and do more of what's working, because that will lead you to grow faster and make more of an impact.
Awesome. So we have it. Do it because you love it. Be consistent and be patient. That's really great advice. Thank you three so much for your time today. It's been really valuable for me and for everybody. I'm getting lots of messages now, people saying thank you for sharing your wisdom. Just before we all log off, I want you to remember that the next session is with Lee Fan, who is an investigative journalist with The Intercept. And he's going to be joining us on the 24th of September at 10 a.m. Pacific time to tell us how we can write and do proper investigative journalism to tell stories. So make sure you sign up for that. But thank you, John. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Jasmine. This has been awesome. You're all stars. And I feel very motivated now, and I hope everybody here does too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.